Okay, hello everybody. Simon Dixon here. I'm going live for my third emergency broadcast. I tend to only do these emergency broadcasts when I think there's something that needs to get people's attention in the financial space, more than the other broadcasts that I do where I continually update people. So today I just wanted to prepare people for some of the things that I think come next. There may be a lot of uncertainty right now. First off, if you are in a position where your safety is in threat because of the decisions of political leaders, then my thoughts are with you, and you're probably doing what you need to do. This is more for the rest of the people that need to get ahead of the financial situation as a result of much of the geopolitics that are occurring right now, as a result of the Russia and Ukraine situation that has been escalating rapidly. So by way of background, my name is Simon Dixon. I wrote the first published book in the world to include Bitcoin. I used to work in investment banking, and I've been an investor in the space. Published a video over a decade ago called The Great Depression of the 2020s, and I've been trying to protect and help people protect themselves ever since. And the first emergency broadcast, which is a really evolving situation, was when the International Monetary Fund announced their central bank digital currency. The second one was when El Salvador announced that they're launching their Bitcoin-backed bond and the impact that has on the geopolitics. And today we're going to be talking about war. So firstly, this is not a new subject. If you're familiar with my YouTube channel, Simon Dixon, and if you're a subscriber, a while back, several years back, I wrote how to prepare for this very situation. I released a video on World War III and weapons of financial mass destruction. I haven't reviewed back to that, so I can't quite remember exactly what I said, but this was a topic that I was preparing people for a couple of years back. And more recently, I did one on sanctions and the impact on individual personal finance. So the first thing I just want to say is I think in times like this, we often conflate the actions of leaders with the population of the people. And I think when we say things like Russia are, or China is, or US is, we shouldn't conflate the actions of the leaders with the actions of the population and the people. Because often leaders are doing things that people don't necessarily want, and it just inspires hate crime and various other things. Tried to talk a bit more about that on my earlier, more casual broadcast. But today it's about a financial forecast. I'm not a political forecaster. I use finances, and finances tend to tell you where the direction of politics is going. So I wanted to really focus on you as an individual, on some of the things that I've been doing, that I've been trying to warn people of over the last few decades, and really what I've dedicated 2 decades of my life to as a complete monetary and financial geek. And as I said, I'm not a political forecaster, I'm more of a financial forecaster. So firstly, where is the finances telling me that this politics is going? So if the politics leads the finances, I'm looking at the finances leading the politics. Looking at this financially, I think we can make some forecasts about what happens next politically. And so financially, it makes 0 sense to enter into World War III, but there is a very clear path to enter into that, which is just Russia needs to touch a NATO member country, and then all of those countries need to act as an aggression against all countries. So once you see any indication that there is going to be any strategic move from Russia on a NATO country, then I think we are talking about the scenario that everyone needs to be preparing for, which the financial markets are factoring into the crashes in prices. Gold is not really making much sense at the moment. It's become very volatile, but it shows that gold has become a very challenging asset to forecast in an environment where people are looking at the difference between Bitcoin and gold as well. So what are the finances saying? The finances are telling me that this is not going to lead to Russia touching a NATO country. I could be completely wrong. I'm just talking about what I see in the finances. The pound had a big crash against the euro and the US because leadership in the UK was really taking more of a leadership role in trying to implement some financial weapons of mass destruction through removing the Russian ruby from the SWIFT network, which is the messaging application when you make international payments. So I think the real strategy here is US embarrassment. If I'm reading between the lines, we've seen the complete destruction of countries like Afghanistan as a result of US leaving there. That led to a takeover of the country and a coup, essentially. Sorry to get too deep into the politics. I'm just trying to read the finance. And therefore, that was an embarrassment to the US. And the Putin was waiting for a scenario where Trump was no longer the leader, that had a relationship with Russia and a strong relationship with Putin. They were waiting for a change of leadership, waiting for a scenario that showed a lack of leadership. And waiting for the US dollar to destroy itself through ginormous money printing, and countries like El Salvador deciding that the writing's on the wall, we're going to start hedging against the dollar, and we're going to start creating financial products with Bitcoin. These are all very, very early indications in the financial markets of where things are going. Putin takes that as an opportunity to resolve some of the challenges with Ukraine and Russia. I can't say that I'm an expert on the situation there. I've just been reading what's happening in financial markets. And so there we are. Now we're in the situation that we're in. And I think this is just a way of showing that Russia can exercise extreme influence, resolve an issue that it wanted to resolve through Ukraine becoming more aligned with the West rather than the Russian ideology. And therefore, by not touching a NATO country, US won't retaliate militarily, and instead they use weapons of financial mass destruction that I've talked about in previous broadcasts in order to have more of a covert effect on people rather than actually ending up in war situations. So that's my forecast. It's a US embarrassment exercise because there is allegiances and alliances being formed as China has built its empire and is getting ready and is completely positioned over a multi-decade strategy of forming alliances, investing globally, doing it with less IMF predatory loans, and really shifting from what I call the military crisis, which was the US empire and the British empire, over to more of an environmental crisis, which is the China empire, competing with more of a wealth crisis. I'll go a bit more into that as well as a result of those that get on the right side of financial affairs, giving with Bitcoin as a kind of a life jacket for people that want to exit geopolitical speculation with their finances as well. So that's the way that I actually see this. I think this is embarrass the US, China become the next part of their power as well. And rather than seeing a war, I think we're going to see financial currency wars and financial weapons of mass destruction, with countries deciding how they're going to structure the debt capital markets and the currency markets in the lead up to this. So that's what I'm forecasting in terms of the financial side, as I said, given many things on that. I think it's a strengthening of the China empire and a movement away, but actually the US still has, despite the fact that they have completely destroyed the supply of dollars, which has led to inflation, which is being exported into other countries that rely upon the dollar, gold being priced in dollars and oil being priced in dollars. A strengthening of still the dollar's position in the world. So really you have a strengthening economy despite all of the fears out there around the over-indebtedness. In China, it's still built upon a culture of savings and investments. even though it's copied much of the Western model with its banking system. This is the strengthening of that. Now, if you've watched any of my previous broadcasts, remember at retirementplanb.com over 2 years ago, I gave 5,000 years of monetary history and a step-by-step of exactly how I'm investing and preparing for the Great Depression of the 2020s. I said that in a video in 2010 on YouTube, where I released a video called The Great Depression of the 2020s from a talk I gave in 2009, where I was going through a decade of financial engineering as a result of not changing anything since the financial crisis, leading to the complete, the situation we are right now, where you create ginormous systemic risk in the banking system through the world's largest regulated debt-based Ponzi scheme called fiat currencies. And then you have an unwinding of the process through central bank digital currencies, hence the earlier broadcast that I gave. I tweeted out today a video that I released in 2016 when I first started talking about the significance in banking disruption, not Bitcoin disruption, as a result of central bank digital currencies and central banks getting ready to wage war on retail and private banks as a result of the world's largest regulated debt-based Ponzi scheme. So they can deleverage the economies. The upside of that is you have a non-debt-based currency being introduced into a country. The downside of that is the impact it has on your freedoms, artificial intelligence, politics, and fiscal and monetary unions, and therefore policies being implemented into currencies and technology using that in order to automate the process of negative interest rate, tax collection, anti-money laundering, sanctions, and just general freedom to move money and freedom and control. Everyone called me a conspiracy theorist at the time. I was just reading the finances and trying to explain politics based upon financial movements. So if anyone wants an insight into how I think, it's because I look at the financial markets before I look at the politics and then try and make political assumption. Really, how does one protect themselves in an environment like this? Well, it's everything I've been to share with people for over 2 decades now and over a decade on my YouTube channel. And I will continue to share and repeat messages and share exactly how I am doing things as well. The way to protect yourself is to be prepared for inflation, deflation, economic growth, economic decline, censorship through sanctions, and financial system failures. And I laid out exactly how I do that over 2 years. I did 2 years ago exactly how to get yourself ready before these things happen. And a year ago, well, actually towards the end of last year, I did almost 12 hours of free content masterclass on that, leaving all of that content up there to help and support people. Even got my book that I published over a decade ago called Protect Your Future Before Governments Go Bust. You can get a completely free copy of that on retirementplanb.com/book to see how I was trying to help people and protect people over a decade ago. So those are the things, right? So the 3 things that I have always said in my books, in my videos for 2 decades, in universities, to politicians, now to governments when have been consulting, presidents like in El Salvador on how to structure products, and the countries there. It's really about building around money you can own, money you can spend, and money that has a fixed supply. These are the 3 forces, and we are giving every lesson today of why this is important. So, money you can own, why is that important for you? GEO-Politics has shown that financial weapons of mass destruction and currency wars are the new tool, because when we have a world that has nuclear warfare, the incentives to avoid wars are very big. And so covert wars are the new tools. That means that you might be born. Remember, I said this is not me saying what's wrong or right by the political leaders. This is me saying you as an individual that could get caught in the middle of geopolitics through no fault of your own, other than the luck or disluck of the country that you were born in, and the environment and tools that you were given based upon the country's politics. This is for the individual that wants to understand how to protect himself, but it also scales to companies and countries as well. But money your own, why is that important? Well, there's a few things that can happen here. The first one is that through sanctions are essentially ways of restricting monetary flows to places where money doesn't want, or politics doesn't want money to flow. So, if you are involved in just by the sheer nature of the country that you were born in or the bank account that you opened, if you happen to get on the wrong side of a sanction, then there's going to be ginormous political censorship for you to be able to access those funds and use those funds. Regulated financial institutions, just like the one that I'm the CEO and co-founder of, banktothefuture.com, have to operate within the confines of the laws, regulations, and therefore it leads to you not being able to necessarily access your funds if you get on the wrong side of geopolitics that you can't control or have no influence over yourself. Now, the challenge with sanctions is that the fear of sanctions can lead to run on banks. So by somebody saying that they want to withdraw their money from account out of fear of some kind of financial sanction, that can lead to the exposure of the financial system because the money does not exist. The money at the bank was created as a loan and is insured by another Ponzi scheme that can release the fragile system that we saw in 2007. So political sanctions can lead to the need to bail in. And bail in is the process of a bank exercising their legal entitlement to your money. When you deposit your money at a bank, the bank is the legal owner of that money, and they can bail it in if they can't get a government bailout, or they can't, implement some kind of reform in order to taper a Ponzi scheme, as it were, is the phrase that they use. So this is one of the things, the way you protect yourself from that is by having money that you can own, which is why I've been saying the need and the demand for Bitcoin would go up over the last decade as a result of that, as a result of giving people the ability to own their own money and have a private key that helps them figure out what they're going to be doing next. Now, Bitcoin is not a tool to get around sanctions. Bitcoin is a tool to protect yourself in an environment of sanctions, to protect the innocent people that are getting in the way, that are getting caught in the middle of geopolitics. So please do not interpret me as stating that Bitcoin is a tool for countries to try and get around sanctions. It is a tool to allow people to transact independent of politics. It is a politically neutral currency that any country, current individual, company, central bank, or whoever wants to use can use and can operate within the confines of law. I already gave more of an update at how committing crime on Bitcoin is a bad idea in my last video where I talked about sanctions, Bitcoin, and war. So protecting yourself is about giving yourself a position where you can own your own money. I've been sharing many, many ways of doing that. Bitcoin is the easiest tool for people to be involved in a politically neutral. Now, I've also talked about the concept of spending less than you earn, investing the difference, and leaving funds in a security bucket so that you don't have to be subject to mercy to the volatility of Bitcoin by separating your investment money from your individual savings and security bucket. The security bucket consisting of things where you own the private key, like Bitcoin, like physical gold, and a certain amount of money in the currency that most of your expenses are, knowing that it can be at the mercy of a bail-in, and therefore people protect themselves by using bonds, because bonds are at the credit risk of the country and the government rather than the credit risk of the bank and subject to bail-ins. So that's why I've talked about these concepts of how to use different assets and asset protection as a mechanism for ensuring that you're ready for inflation, deflation, economic growth, economic decline, financial censorship, and the collapsing and changing of currencies and the other events that I've always talked about that you can still get in the free series at retirementplanb.com. So money you can own, protection number one. Money you can spend, protection number two. In an environment of this, it's very, very hard to have a big block of gold and be able to spend that in the global markets, but at the same time, 5,000 years of protection. It's challenging to spend, but the second thing is money that you can spend, which is why I've always talked about Bitcoin being a tool and a mechanism. If people haven't figured out the intrinsic value of Bitcoin, stating that it's just a get-rich-quick scheme, a Ponzi scheme, a currency just for drug dealers, or any of those things, or a scam that people call it, they are learning firsthand. And the earlier people learn that, the more financially they have benefited from being able to do that. Now, remember, we are moving to an environment of central bank digital currencies. Central bank digital currencies are going to be the most censored, politically charged currency that we have ever experienced. Way back in civil wars in Abraham Lincoln's day, they funded it through the equivalent of a central bank digital currency by just the government printing a new note, which wasn't backed by debt. All money today is created as a digital currency by a private bank. Every time you take on a mortgage, you take on a credit card, you borrow money, that is all backing the world's largest regulated Ponzi scheme and driving the world's largest wealth inequality that we are experiencing, as those that have used debt in order to invest in assets are got on the right side, and those that have used debt in order to invest in consumption, which tends to be those that are in the poorest or most uneducated parts of society, end up on the wrong side. The middle class also decided to use debt in order to consume, and therefore can end up in that situation during these financial turbulent events, and complete dependency upon governments in order to get bigger and bigger and bigger and print more and more and more, and then demands during times like pandemics to request the government to print more to get them out of their financial situation because they got on the wrong side of the world's largest debt-based regulated Ponzi scheme, and therefore live in a place of dependency, and therefore the government gets bigger and bigger and bigger. They print more money, which is a hidden tax on everybody, inflates the assets of the wealthy, and gets people on the side of this. This thing that I've been trying to explain to people, that it was a bad idea to let banks own your own money and become the legal owner, to have banks spend your money through rehypothecation, and to allow them to inflate the money supply through debt, leading to some incredibly unsustainable trends. The good thing is that there are solutions. The problem is the solution is going to be central bank digital currencies, the creation of a new monetary system. The downside of that is that politics and a fiscal and monetary union, which means that essentially fiscal policy is things that government want to do for the country, and monetary policy is how to introduce a stable currency, which central banks have failed at time and time again, and which is usually introduced, and the history of central banking is funding wars, as we are experiencing. And so by having this mechanism and banks creating money as debt, you create this desire and need and demand to be able to spend your money and leave the censorship up to law enforcement, as opposed to financial institutions at the middle that need to adjust to all of these trends. So that's the second one. The third one, which if you're not familiar with my content, been saying this one for a long, long time, is money that has an independent monetary policy than any one country's agenda, and has a fixed supply that you can predict and forecast into the future. Prior to Bitcoin, gold was the one that had the most fixed supply. It's not as fixed as Bitcoin, which is enforced by maths and code. As the price of gold goes up, then more miners will mine for more gold and the supply increases. However, that mechanism has preserved people's wealth for over 5,000 years. Bitcoin has significantly increased people's wealth over the last decade. The initial knee-jerk reaction to this, and if you are a short-term speculator or a trader, that's certainly not what I'm encouraging or even advising or do myself. You are the ones that will get wrecked on the wrong side of this if you are the same as the 90% that lose money trying to speculate short term. It's about having a longer term approach and understanding the different events that you're looking to protect yourself from, rather than going all in trading, going in and out and creating all of the mistakes that I've been trying to support people in not making, because I used to work in the investment banks. I've seen firsthand as a market maker the shenanigans that happen in those trading markets, and the effect that that has on individual traders and all the people trying to get on the right side of these short-term trends. So money you can own is protecting yourself from what comes next with the central bank digital currencies, protecting yourself from bail-ins, the censorship that will happen as a result of those central bank digital currencies. Just look at it right now. SWIFT is a network that is really going to be controlling, based upon geopolitics, what is going to happen as the outcomes of this. And it's really going to become one of the main tools for financial weapons of mass destruction. That's going to drive people into central bank digital currencies, which are coming. China has been completely preparing for these scenarios, 10 steps ahead of every single move, building alignment, building an economy and growth based upon savings. Yes, they got the debt side slightly wrong, and they implemented much of the Western debt-based Ponzi scheme, but it wasn't at the same scale and to the same severity. Then, that really leads to the financial censorship, which drives the demand for Bitcoin, which takes the middle person out so that you can have law enforcement doing their thing between individuals. And if you check out my previous videos on why that does not lead to more crime and why that leads to less crime as a result of that, but without all the censorship and inefficiency in the middle, like we are seeing in Canada right now, that is deciding that the most important thing for them is to use the financial system in order to stop people protesting and raising funds in order to keep the governments in check from forcing them to give up their job or put something in their body that they don't want in their body. You know, these are the types of conspiracy theories that people accuse me of when I'm just following what's happening in the financial markets and forecasting what that means in terms of the political side as well. So money that has a fixed supply is a hedge against inflation, deflation, economic growth, economic decline, and the policies of central bankers. Some of them are going to completely hyperinflate their currencies and end up with unthinkable situations like the people are experiencing in Venezuela, Argentina, Lithuania, Turkey. The middle class completely being destroyed of their wealth that they'd worked their whole life for is not a fun thing, and it does need to be protected from. Thank God we have lifelines and products that can support people if people just get for themselves financially educated. I know it's an incredibly complex subject. There's a lot of moving parts. I spent 2 decades of my life trying to get myself on top of all these things. But my promise to you, my commitment to you is, as long as YouTube allows me to release these videos, then I will release those videos so that you can make better decisions based upon some of the things that you're seeing in the world, and share some of the tools that are going out there that I've been investing in. I've been dedicated in the last decade to try and support companies that can build these tools for more people, and give more financial inclusion and more tools for people to use. So the ability to protect from that, and countries using tools with Bitcoin because they want to protect against the inflation of the dollar. And so remember the tools that I talked about in the Retirement Plan B 4-part video series. I said we are in a dollar standard until we are not. And then I talked about different strategies. So still in times of uncertainty like this, you tend to have markets. You can look at the currency markets. The pound was the currency that crashed the hardest relative to the euro and the dollar. That's the financial markets forecasting that the leadership in the UK is trying to take more of a forefront in NATO. And therefore, if Russia decides that they're going to attack NATO, then it may be that the currency that is being crashed the hardest is the largest target, or the one geopolitically, like Poland or something that is there. I don't think that is going to happen. I don't think that's what comes next, because it makes zero sense for Russia to attack a NATO country. I think the strategy is embarrass the US to show that this is possible. Don't touch a NATO country, because that would be disaster for Russia. And then everything plays out in terms of China strengthening its position with its central bank digital currency, and competing with organizations like the International Monetary Fund that are making things very, very difficult for countries in Central and South America that are trying to build themselves out of their dependency upon US dollar debt. And so the IMF is making enemies, China's making friends. That's going to play out in terms of a shift in empire. I do not think that the China central bank digital currency is going to become a global currency. I do not think it's going to maintain its power. I do think we are going to get, baskets of central bank digital currencies. I do think that there's going to be large multinational organizations. And I do think that Bitcoin is going to become a tool for freedom for countries, individuals, and companies that want to stay out of the geopolitics and go for politically neutral strategies. What else have I got here for you? I think I'm just making sure I've covered everything that I wanted to cover. Really, it's about staying as neutral as you can, where you can. If you're in a country where that's not possible, then sorry, it's too late. You're focusing on other things for that. For the rest, that are not there yet, I do believe that you need to be looking at jurisdictions that are focused on asset protection. And by asset protection, I put my money in jurisdictions that are focused on political freedom and political neutrality. It's why the Swiss franc has always tend to be a currency of neutrality during times like this. And it's why gold has been a preserver of wealth for 5,000 years, because of its political neutrality. And Bitcoin has had over a decade to become one of the highest performing asset classes in history, as the world has given loads and loads of reasons for why the demand should go up at a fixed supply relative to that. So I'm always looking at jurisdictions, look at the masterclasses that I released on retirementplanb.com, leaving those up there in terms of jurisdiction and ownership of private key. Make sure you have jurisdiction over your own money where you can. I know that that requires a bit more thought about how you manage your expenses and deal with volatility, but I've given many videos and tools on that. You can binge on my YouTube channel, subscribe to the channel, hit like if you think more people should find this information, retweet, I'd really appreciate that. Been shouting as loud as I can for as long as I can, but only in emergency times do people tend to get a lot more views on my videos when I try to share things in these times when people are thinking about them the most. I do believe that the dollar is still going to be a currency in the world, and the only time that it should be considered to be hedged against is when it's not. And that's why I continue to believe that in a central bank digital currency-led world, the dollar has a very strong position in order to exercise some geopolitical currency war influence in a time where China becomes more empire-built and statistically significant in the world. So that's where commodities, gold, private keys, various other things that I've talked about. I'm throwing a lot on you, but I've got videos and content for all these things as well. Invest politically neutral. As I said, get ready for inflation, deflation, economic growth, economic decline, sanctioning and financial and financial collapses and financial various other things. Be ready for all of those events so that you can stand by as a spectator rather than rushing in fast decisions, irrational decisions, in order to adjust to that as well. I believe that the way that this goes, as I said, I alluded to, is that the British pound, and the US empire, the UK empire and the US empire were military crises. They were empires built upon violence and using financial weapons of mass destruction backed by military. I believe that the next empire, at whatever stage it happens, whenever it happens, will be global currency wars with the dollar, IMF, global multinational currencies, Bitcoin, and geopolitics, dictating different baskets, and even a NATO currency, whatever it may be. So political alignment with central bank digital currencies, which is a war on private banks, which means you need to have real protections from private banks, which I think are the net losers because of the Ponzi scheme that they have perpetuated, and all the people that cared are rich enough already and out of the system and benefited from all the bail-ins and everything that happened as a result of all this asset price inflation, which means that we have technology that exists on top of central banks. We have central bank digital currencies being used to replace, so that you don't lose your money in a bank, but you lose your freedom when you swap your currency at a bank in bank failure time for the app that the central bank will launch for you in order to take those funds, and then you opt out of your privacies and freedoms as a result of that in order to protect your wealth. I believe that is where things come next. Call me a conspiracy theory, but look over the last books that I've written. When I wrote the book, Bank to the Future, Protect Your Future Before Governments Go Bust, everyone said it was absolutely crazy. And now it just looks like a map for modern monetary theory that we talked about, metaverse I talked about, Bitcoin I talked about, 7 hugely disruptive technologies, building social capital, and various other things. I really underplayed the freedom side and the privacy side. Sorry, not the freedom side, the privacy side, because I didn't appreciate the impact of it, which leads me to what I am trying to work on today, because I believe that during the shift from a US empire to a China empire, we do have an environmental crisis. I know people have their own perspectives on that, but the environmental crisis will be the attack on the Chinese empire, and the wealth inequality that will lead to countries using a model such as what El Salvador is doing, where they're building their economy based upon political freedom and currency freedom, and ditching central banks and deciding that they're going to use fiat currency for what it is and Bitcoin for what it is, and constructing financial products where they're raising money in currency that goes down in value, like the dollar, backed by and using it to purchase currency that is designed to go fixed supply, go up in value over the long term. Everyone will think that they're crazy because they're short-term traders. They've lost money short-term, and everybody's going to be saying what a crazy thing that is. But once people see the success of such policies as my forecast, obviously it's a big risk. I can't guarantee that the next 13 years look like the previous 13 years, but I believe that the financial markets are telling us that the demand for money you can own, money you can spend, and money that has a fixed supply increases, and it becomes a tool that countries can use, and they are already using in conjunction with their central bank digital currency policy, giving every individual, every company, every country, and every central bank the opportunity to play those trends in geopolitics and get on the right side of these wealth inequalities and creating wealth effects within those currencies. So what's going to happen next? Well, I'll continue to give my more shorter form updates, and less. I'll do emergency broadcasts as and when they are needed, as big events happen. But subscribe to my channel on YouTube and I will continue to release content, more shorter form content on little things and more bite-sized things that you can do. Please do help me get this content out to as many people. Retweet, share, share with people that you think have opinions on this. Let me know in the comments section. Let YouTube algorithms come into place. If you hit the like button, it really helps get this to the top of YouTube. And if you add a comment letting me know what you think, then it also helps more people to see this content. We've had some of our previous videos go viral just by liking and people adding comments. And YouTube giving us a bit of love for that. So please do support with that if you think that this is worthy content for the world to know. In 2007, I wrote a book to protect students and graduates and get them ready for the financial crisis. In 2011, I wrote the first published book in the world to include Bitcoin to get everybody ready to protect themselves before governments go bust. And now in 2022, can't even keep up with what year it is, I've decided that it's now time to release another book. If you want my previous books, you can get them for free. This is about getting the information out there. Go to retirementplanb.com/book. You can get a digital copy of Bank to the Future, Protect Your Future Before Governments Go Bust. You can access that free video series that I released 2 years ago. And just go to retirementplanb.com/book, and you can access those tools. But my commitment, my public commitment now is that I need to do the updated version. I do believe that the next trend is a wealth crisis. And a wealth crisis, I mean, is not the complete destruction of wealth, but a ginormous shift in people's wealth as a result of those that get on the right side of geopolitics and these shifting change, currency wars, and financial weapons of mass destruction. So my goal is to release and get a book out as fast as I can. This time I'll do it in audio. I also don't have the attention span to read anymore after a decade of being indoctrinated into the internet. But that's my commitment. I've already started writing that. And my goal is to try and get that out as fast as I possibly can to do that. But in the meantime, I'll keep releasing content on YouTube. If you want to be first to notified about the new book when it comes out, head over to retirementplanb.com/book. Full disclosure, I make zero money out of any of my books. I never collect a check from them. It's just about getting the information out there in a way that is likely to consume and publish for the historical record some of the events that people have always called me crazy for, that then when you read back and look at them don't seem so crazy at the time. And again, it's because I look at finances. I'm a monetary geek. I've dedicated 2 decades of my life in every aspect of trying to be able to understand more and deeper into the financial markets, from academically in economics to working in investment banking, stockbroking, trading, market making, to educating people around the world on monetary reform, to being a part of the Bitcoin community, speaking at the first Bitcoin event, investing in over 100 companies in the industry, financial planning qualifications, whatever you want to do, 2 decades of this, and creating content on YouTube as well. So if you'd like to share anything in the comments, and do that. But I always leave on the same message. By wealth crisis, I mean getting yourself on the right side of financial change. I know it's a complex subject, but I've tried to break things down into simple things in easy language that hopefully anyone can understand. And I will continue to work at that if you give me more feedback on things that you would like to see. So, and all these emergency broadcasts and all my videos, I always try to remember to people that even in times of ginormous political destruction, wealth inequality, and quite frankly, war crimes, you always need to remember that we are alive at one of the most interesting, fascinating, and exciting times in financial history. If you don't embrace that and you get on the wrong side of finances, unfortunately, it has disastrous consequences for some. For those that embrace it and try and get themselves on the right side of financial history, then it benefits those people, and you can become a force for good to try and support people that were not fortunate enough to understand content like this, not have access to the internet, not have access to the resources and privileges that all of us, or I, was certainly born into. And you can try and support people with your wealth, hopefully, in making a difference in places that don't have the same privileges and the access to financial resources, the access to the internet, and the access to many of the tools and privileges that we're born in just due to the luck of which country you were born into and which family you were born into. So always remember, we are alive at the most interesting and exciting time in financial history. Some are going to get hurt, some are going to do really well. I want to make sure that you are on the right side of this change. If you enjoyed this content, do me a favor, like, share, subscribe, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell symbol, hit all, share this with your friends, loved ones in social media, and I will make sure that you are given the information. At least what you do with it is your choice. I can't give you financial advice. All I can do is share with you some of the things that I think and give commentary as this whole situation unfolds. My message is for peace, love, and unity, and making sure that you get on the right side of that change. Peace.